Hey, folks, welcome back to Crypto Heartbeat. This is Matt, and I am so honored to be on with an OG Hexican like BallietBran. Uh, what do I call you? That's what I always wanted to know. Do I call you BallietBran? Do I call you something else?
Well, so yeah, Balliet's my last name,
Yeah.
Brandon's my first name. So growing up, it's just been usually from like my brothers, like Bran or Brandon or
Okay.
Brandman. Any variation, I guess, works. I mean, doesn't really matter for me. Balliet Bran or anything like that kind of works.
That's awesome. Well, at first, when I first saw your stuff, I didn't know. I didn't know that's what your name was. And of course, I learned that as I got into watching your stuff. But I'm a fan of yours, and it's kind of cool because I feel like I see you all over the place. You're prolific in your uploading of content. You've been around for a long time, and I think you have a perspective that's unique. And I think you stand out in the community as probably one of the youngest influencers, if not the youngest. And I think that is refreshing, and it's also a neat perspective that I'd love to talk to you more about. So welcome to Crypto Heartbeat, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's fantastic to meet you.
Same with you, man. It's really exciting because I haven't been around here. I've been Hex since day one and followed Richard since 2017. But as far as the actual streaming of it, it was Hexologist and then RG3. But what I'm trying to say is it's so cool to see all of the people coming on board and being able to fill in some of the gaps that maybe some of the other streamers just didn't really talk about or kind of touch. So it's awesome, man. There's plenty of fish in the sea. It's such a abundance mentality, in my opinion, of everyone having different learning styles and kind of connecting with other people as
Yes.
far as how you relate to them. And I love your show too, man. I watch every episode and got the notifications turned on and stuff like that.
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
anyways, it's really cool to see just all of the work collectively. It's awesome to have you here because I think it's kind of filled in some of the gap that might have been missing a little bit, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
very
Well,
clear.
I appreciate that. Well, it's really cool to visit with you. I wanted to spend some time just kind of getting to know you more. And I think, when you're somebody that's in front of people and you're always kind of serving with content, it's rare that you get to kind of talk about your story. And I'd love to kind of hear about it. If we can start with, you've been streaming a long time. I went back to your very first video. I saw you cooking some things. I saw some workouts. I saw all kinds of stuff. Tell me your kind of YouTube story, but then how that kind of merged in with Richard Hart and Hex and all that.
Right. So, I mean, I guess it goes way, way back to just growing up because I've got three older brothers, and my parents growing up, they would do like home videos, so they'd record us either playing sports or just around the house, stuff like that. And I was always fascinated that you could have that piece of history. And at the time it was just like a VHS and stuff that they were having the tapes on. And then it evolved into the more digital and stuff like this. But I was always, just really fascinated with, even if it was something that no one watched or other people didn't really care about, I always thought that, hey, this is kind of for me as well, kind of like just documenting history. So I actually have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel that got deleted in 2000, either 2007 or 2008. Alphabet, which is the company that owns Google, bought out YouTube, and there was some sort of like change where, long story short, all of the first 33 videos got deleted, and those were some like really cool memories, like me boxing my brothers and stuff like
Yeah.
this that got deleted. But anyways, the channel itself, like I purposely, when I got into Hex, I was asking myself like, man, because obviously I've got a lot of stuff that's not even related, cooking or making a Smucker's Uncrustable or talking about other things. And so I just realized like, well, hey, this channel is kind of just a documentation anyways. I'm just going to leave it up there. But it's been really cool because I got into crypto in 2017, around March 2017. And I never felt comfortable making videos about it just because the space was so new. And I had seen so many people, myself included, get wrecked by listening to these, YouTube influencers and things. So I kind of held off on it until Hex came out. And then I was like, okay, this is something that been following Richard for over 4 years. I can get behind this. And so I just joined everyone else in the streaming.
That's awesome, man. Well, and things have grown quickly. I mean, I was looking through your library and I mean, you are uploading a lot of content and and you get a lot of people reference your stuff. And I know there's all sorts of controversy and all kinds of things that are going on, which we probably won't talk much about. But so, okay, so tell me about Hex itself. So you talk about being day one Hex. Tell me, like, I really want to know when you say day one, what do you mean and how did that happen? Because the beginnings of things often get people have different views of those. Tell me that story.
Totally. So yeah, once again, was following Richard since around March of 2017, and I'd had some other cryptos at the time, some Bitcoin and some Litecoin and things like this. And Richard had called the exact top of the Bitcoin, the end of the bull market in 2017. And the long story short is I didn't really believe him. Like I'd heard him say the top call. I'd kind of just held my bags, almost like a Stockholm syndrome type thing. And instead of listening to him, once it was finally the end of the bear market, Richard, he had realized that he could develop something even better. And so first he came out with this product that was going to be called like CFD token, and it ended up being a little bit too complex of a crypto that was actually going to be viable and usable. And then he realized like, hey, let's replace some of the banking products. If you are going to be your own bank, the second most popular product is the certificate of deposit. So I'd gotten in and pretty much consolidated the rest of my bag that I had at that time from the bottom of the bear market. And I was just following Richard. So he had mentioned that if you had Bitcoin, you would get a free claim if you had it, I think, before December 1st. And so I believe one Bitcoin would allow you to free claim like 10,000 hex, something like that. So I'd converted all of it into Bitcoin, did my free claim. And then you could have the adoption amplifier, which was like the next day. And that was like a 351-day launch phase of Ethereum and kind of buying and minting the actual hex itself. So I kind of just averaged in with the rest of the bag that I had. And it's been quite an experience. I mean, a lot of people, they FOMO'd on day one and, myself included, but it's really something that I've never been more happy or excited about. It's a really unique experience.
Well, absolutely. And this is really cool. I'm so glad I'm talking to you because here's this. And I think for a lot of people that are newer that, probably more my age are coming into this because of the PulseChain, right? They got into the PulseChain sacrifice. Somebody told them, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who said, yeah, my brother-in-law like got me in. He's like, you have to do this. Don't ask any questions. And of course, here I am hearing your story about literally day one with Bitcoin through that transform lobby as well. And it's encouraging because, we look at a 10,000x from day one of Hex, which is incredible. And of course, here we are again at an interesting inflection point in Hex's history, but we've got the PulseChain coming up, right? In another 10,000 to 1 scenario. And of course, massive support when it comes to the sacrifice set, which is absolutely unbelievable. And I want to talk about PulseChain here in a bit, but as far as, this process, right? So now you've gone through this major run up, 10,000x, and here we come over the top of it. What's this ride been like for you? Because you've watched your bag grow significantly over time. And of course, now you've gone through a full cycle.
So yeah, the ride itself has been actually quite a journey because with say Bitcoin and Litecoin that I was in previously, everything's got a market cycle, right? Whether real estate or crypto. And so Bitcoin and Litecoins at the time that I was in, their market cycle, I think was around like maybe like a three-year cycle. But Hex itself tends to do obviously the same market cycle with the emotions, but it tends to do it way quicker, more quickly. And so you have these peaks and then these lows and then, all of these emotions that happen in the chart itself. But for me, I'd always kind of, even in the beginning when I didn't really know what the shares were and the staking was, I'd kind of just been, listening to Richard for hours and hours of, hey, if you're going to maximize the system, staking long and staking and things like this. So that kind of just allowed me to keep earning Hex and not really be focusing as much on the dips. But I'll say one thing that the time as a Hexican, it's been almost 2 years as of December 2nd, but it's been tough, man. It's been tough. So like having all of the controversy around Richard and then controversy around Hex, it almost makes me like earlier in the days, it would almost make me like question my sanity. Like, wait, am I the only one that's not seeing what these other people are seeing, or what's going on here?
Yeah.
But finally it played out, and I just looked at all of the facts versus the opinions that other people had against Richard.
Yeah. And it's so cool that he's been redeemed in all of this. And I feel like things have calmed down recently. I came into Hex probably about 10 days before Big Payday. I saw some TV ad in the middle of the night and, thought it was something it wasn't. And, and I was just taking a flyer on it thinking, I'll just throw some money in this and see what happens. And of course I sat at the kitchen table almost every night as it just kept going up and up and up, and telling my wife about it. And she's like, that's not real. And I'm like, well, it sure is real. And when that stake finished, my daughter got a car, and it's like, nice. Okay, is it real enough to you now? And, you think about that process. I think about a young guy, at least I consider you younger than me. Sure. When you've come through this is a unique perspective that you have as a young person coming into something that is so transformative with so much of your life ahead of you. If you kind of shift forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what are you looking out at the future? Because, I think guys your age in the past would have been, doing very different things than you're doing today. What do you have on your future schedule?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, it kind of goes to a lot of the like relation that I had with Richard in the beginning, was that because I was following him, and I'd remember that he had his sci-fi book, and he had other books as well. But in one of his books called Fix the World, literally the first line is like, if you're going to fix the world, you kind of have to like fix the money and get people what they want and need first, which is, getting away from that 9-to-5 job and being able to kind of spend time how you want to. But the point is as far as the future goes, 5, 10 years down, I really like what people like yourself are doing, what people like Richard is planning on doing. I mean, the $27 million donation that went to Sens, the longevity. I really want to do stuff that's just more than just myself, or more than just this channel, kind of like helping other people to maybe get to the same position too, or at least not have to, once again, work for someone else for the rest of their life. But you really have to ask yourself, like, once you do have that, like, now that you have, the money problem solved, and now that you've got, all the time on your hands, like, what are you going to do at that time? So lately I've been listening and looking into more the sci-fi book that Richard has, and someone had actually done like an audiobook conversion. They're still working on it, but they've got like 10 or 12 hours. And I've been listening to that, and it's like, man, this is kind of more what, I like to be focusing on, or what the bigger picture is that most people don't really look at when they're in the rat race, or when they're focused on just getting out of that escape now.
That's cool. Well, and as a kind of a disciple of Richard Hart in some ways, right? You're reading his materials. I think what's really interesting about Richard is, before all this stuff happened, I think a lot of people don't realize. They just think, oh, Bitcoin guy, rich guy, started his own coin. And what you've experienced is actually, it takes a lot to write your thoughts down, right? And when you talk about hours and hours of content that's been created, Richard's certainly done a lot of thinking and processing around how to make his own life and other people's lives better. And I think that I hear him in a kind of braggadocious way, being like, I wrote all the self-help books. And what you don't realize is that doesn't come off for a while. And it's like, well, no, if you actually, and I've looked at the content, and there's some real practical, thoughtful things. And I did a video on Think and Grow Rich, the Napoleon Hill book. And a lot of that stuff that's at the core of this, like, what kind of attitude do you have? What kind of philosophy do you have? And not so that you can dominate people, but that you can live a richer life and you can be more fulfilled, if you will. So when you talk about sci-fi stuff and you talk about, these type of things, is that something that you see yourself promoting or kind of getting into to help encourage other people with not just financial, but also with kind of the self-help side?
Totally. Yeah. So Yeah, definitely. So as far as the streaming goes and as far as my channel goes, we talked about how most of it's Hex and PulseChain and crypto now, how the past itself, I didn't delete those videos, but they're still there. But lately it's been like, man, I see a lot of not trials and tribulations, but I see a lot of like growth within the Hex community. And part of that growth comes with just different kinds of problems or different scenarios that didn't happen before. And so as I was reading the sci-fi book and listening to it, it's like, man, I think a lot of people could really benefit from this. But once again, if you're not reading the book or listening to the audiobook, then it's not really going to benefit you or help you because you're not using the tool that's there. So I did create like a second YouTube channel, and it's just called like Surviving HEXICAN, kind of just self-help type of stuff. And part of it is to keep myself accountable. That's going to be a lot more of a better experience if you're sharing your story and journey with other people. But then also another part of it is helping people that maybe had like the sudden wealth syndrome that I had, and just some of these things that we talk about, but you don't think it's actually going to happen to you until it does. That person that had $100 that's now $1 million, or 1,000 that's now 10 million. It's like, you never really think that you're going to get there until it happens. And then you're like, oh my gosh, like, now I am experiencing these things. So part of me is just wanting to kind of talk about some things that I've experienced or things that I've learned from, and hopefully share it with others, and maybe they can benefit from it as well. But it's separate from crypto.
You know what I love that you just said? This is so fantastic. And this is really for the viewers that are watching this. So BallietBran just said without hesitating, when $100 is $1 million and when 1,000 is 10 million. I just wanted everyone to recognize the fact that he said that without stopping. And that's the thing I think that people that have been around for a little while are just absolutely stunned as possible. And what you're saying is it is possible.
Totally. Well, and it's happened to me too. Like my initial, X amount of dollars that I had put into Hex total, it's like, it reaches those numbers. And at first you're like, okay, 6 figures is a goal. Like, oh, if I could get this to 100,000, and then that milestone hits, and then it's like $250,000. Then it's like, oh my gosh, like $250,000, 25% of the way there. And then it's like half. And then it's like, and then once you hit that next barrier, just like the 6 figure, now it's like, oh my gosh, like, is this real life, slapping yourself in the face. And then, but the point is, even if I had wanted to, I couldn't realize all of that. Right. Because it's staked and X amount is liquid, but just the principles themselves show you that, hey, what Richard was initially talking about wanting to create a crypto and a product that just gained so much mass and wealth, it's actually coming to fruition. And so a lot of people think that they're like too late, or when it dips, they think that the world is falling, but in reality, it's just part of the journey. And you can't get those 10,000x gains without some serious corrections and dips along the way. Yeah. But that's just the cycle.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's encouraging for a lot of people that you've seen it, through the process, and we're going to see it repeat over and over and over again. Well, that's super encouraging. So, all right. So this is fun for me because I look at a big shift happening in our world, right? So I jokingly say, as a Gen Xer, I've got 1 foot in the analog world and 1 foot in the digital world. And here's a guy like you that's fully in the digital world, and you're accustomed to this type of gain and you've experienced it. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that go, it's so different and it's so extremely different that they're like, I can't even imagine this or fathom this. And so what I see is happening is we're seeing this revolution in the financial world where, in a way, the old financial system is literally, it's falling apart, right? And, there's this new system that's coming along, and you've obviously taken advantage of that new system. But one of the comments I want to make, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well, is that you see a lot of people that are, controlling these handles or these levers of political power, saying, here's the ways in which we can social engineer, and we'll give everybody, $1,000, or we'll do this basic income type of stuff, and all of these kind of schemes by which people are trying to improve. Now, I'm not questioning their heart in the matter, right? That they want to help. But what's so interesting about the promise of crypto in this new age is this idea of wealth being centered around like-minded communities of people with products that help really create an abundance if you take advantage of them. And I was listening to Raul Pal, and he said that what is different is it used to be that all the big players in the financial world were the only ones that had access to the instruments of wealth creation. And here it is, a guy like you, a guy like me, all these HEXICANs and PulseCANs. Literally, it's a matter of you have to make a choice, but now we're on a level playing field. And in some cases, we're ahead of the old school institutional guys. What thoughts do you have about that as how that affects things in the future?
So I think it's amazing because exactly. So for someone like myself, I just turned 25 on October 24th. And yeah, there's a lot of people that are my age or my generation that understand, like you mentioned, that the old economic system kind of is falling and is kind of failing. And you see what the inflation does as far as making things more expensive and the value of your dollar just getting less and less. And I think it's a really good opportunity. The thing that I will say is most people, I mean, myself included in school, like we're never really taught like financial literacy and kind of how these things work. And so a lot of people, when they get into something for the first time, yeah, maybe it might be a meme coin, or I know a lot of people that are in Hex even that got into BitConnect, like an actual Ponzi scheme, things like this. But, you kind of have to go through. And for me, like when I got into Hex, I had before that, I had bought some trading courses and spent money on this, but I'd kind of learned that experience that most people do, but a lot more quickly. It's kind of like, you're falling on your face and kind of falling forward as quickly as you can because the system is changing so quickly and the technology is, advancing so quickly. But I think it's a really good opportunity for anyone of any age. Like even my grandpa, who's 91.
Yes.
Yeah. He had given us savings bonds growing up, and I got his photo over there. But even he the other day was like, I'm not really a fan of this crypto stuff in general, just as far as most of it. But I see what you're talking about for over a year and a half, and like this is really interesting, and it reminds me of the savings bonds and things like that. So it's really cool that people of all ages and of all income types too, because once again, that $100 that someone thinks is just a small amount, like the cryptocurrency ecosystem as a whole is the highest appreciating asset class, that the world has ever seen. And especially when you're in things like Hex and Pulse and things like this, it can just grow to something you never thought possible. And then, so once that does happen, and once, your dreams are realized or you realize that these things are possible, now it's like, okay, what next, Yeah.
No, that's true. I love the whole savings bond thing, right? As kids, older folks, my relatives gave us savings bonds as well that, were half the value and then they appreciated. And, I look at the same thing here. And, if we were thinking in terms of the future for folks, I mean, I heard the other day that the growth rate of the crypto as a kind of mega asset class is 113% a year. And it started 2 years ago. It did 4 trillion in total volume. And this last year, so it's done 60 trillion. And they're targeting it to be like the bond market, which is about 200 trillion. So if we were to say things are sitting, there's going to be another, massive growth opportunity. And I think, people ask this question, I missed this, or I'm early and all of that. I've often said it's like typing in IP addresses to get to websites. We don't even have web names, we don't have, domain names yet in all of this. What would you say to somebody that feels like, what should I do? And that's not that we're giving financial advice, but I almost like this real simple thing. Hey, I want to give my nephew a savings bond. Well, if I wanted to give my nephew $25, it'd probably be better for me to stake it out to some anniversary for him, put the $25 in there, and there's a possibility it's 25 grand in 10 years, right? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely amazing. So I had mentioned that my, grandpa had kind of given us the savings bonds. And then most recently when he had called me a second time for like the birthday and things, it's like, okay, now I've got my opportunity to pay it forward. Cause he wanted like, he's like, hey, Bran, how can I put in $500 in here? And I'm thinking, dude, that 500, like there's at least going to be like $200 or $300 worth of gas, you know, like, so I'm not telling him about these intricacies, but the point that I'm getting at is, yeah, for me, Hex has been the absolute best gift that I could ever give anybody. There was a Uniswap airdrop, I think maybe September of 2020.
Yeah.
There was a Uniswap airdrop for everyone that had used it once. And I had gotten in my coworker to Hex that also qualified for that Uniswap airdrop. He had a kid recently, and he's like, wait, this is just free money? And I was like, yeah. And so same thing, he was able to take like the $3,000 that he had gotten and like, you know, help support his family and stuff. But the point that I'm getting at is I had maybe like 3 wallets that were able to claim. So maybe $9,000 principal at the time. And my Hex bag had already had, I don't know, 200, 300, however many 100X. And so I took that opportunity to not just be selfish where it's like, okay, this, you know, this feeling is too good and this product is too good that if I don't share this with anyone, you know, I'm almost like very selfish and, you know, they might be mad at me in the future. And so long story short, I had given, so I've got 3 older brothers, my parents, the girlfriend and her family. I'd maybe, you know, divided that $9,000 into X amount of wallets. And now it's like, I mean, even with the dip, with its most recent high, it was like over $1 million, you know, that had been given away. But what I'm getting at is I did the same thing too. So I said, hey, you know, your birthday 3 years out, or hey, maybe before Christmas, say like November or something like that, we'll get you something so you can have a good Christmas present or have a good experience. So it really is just about making experiences, because once you have all the money in the world, it's like, okay, things, they don't really matter as much. It's the things that you can buy and the experiences that you can have with your loved ones that matter.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's talk about the Hex community. I know you're a guy who went to Vegas, right? And what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, from what I understand. But I'm also curious. You've experienced face to face this community. Everybody knows that it's incredible. Give me the BallietBran view on the HEXICAN and PulseChain community.
Yeah, so I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing. So the interesting thing is I've learned growing up that someone can present one image, almost like an actor, where they can present one image and then behind closed doors is something completely. So at the HEXICANs, it's like, man, I've never met a group of people that seemed so authentic. But once again, verifying and not trusting, you know, like just because it seems that way doesn't mean it is. And so RG3 was actually the first person that I had met before Vegas, maybe, I don't know, 6 months before Vegas. And he was actually the one that kind of convinced me that if I had stakes that were ending close to big payday, that if I had wanted more shares, maybe I could end them at a 50% principal, 50% time served, and then restake them out longer. So him and I initially had lunch one time 6 months before Vegas. And then the actual Vegas conference itself, I was a little bit nervous. You know, I'd never been to Vegas and, you know, just flew there solo. And it was a great time. It was a great time. So the first person that I had met was Casey. He was the one that gave us all of these hats, you know. So on the back, it says like LV, you know, Las Vegas 2021. And then he had spent like $1,000, if not a little bit more, on these embroidered hats. And he gave them all away for free, you know. Yeah. And so that was kind of like a testament that like, and he was like, I want to save one for each person. You know, if everyone can't get one, that's fine. But certain people like myself and some of the other streamers got them. And anyways, that was kind of like my first experience face to face with a majority of the community. And everyone was almost like more authentic and more legitimate in real life in person than they were even in the streams, you know, because once, as you mentioned, like it's not just about Hex or crypto, but obviously in real life, you're sharing other things in common too. So my experience was really good. And I'm really looking forward to the next one. I mean, there's like 331 people, I believe, at the conference in 2021. But then for 2022, there's supposed to be like 1,369. And it's like, I didn't even get to meet everyone the first time like I'd wanted. And so even more, it's just going to be, you know, that snowball that goes down the hill.
That's awesome. Are you going to London?
That I'm not. Yeah, it's a little bit too short of a time frame for me,
Yeah.
and just some of the travel stuff as well is
Yeah.
kind of inhibitive for me. But what I will say is, yeah, I mean, it won't be just like with people that missed Vegas the first time or things like this. It won't be the last opportunity that I
Right.
have to meet Richard or give my thanks and things like that. So it's going to be an amazing experience because the second birthday, second year
Yeah.
anniversary of 100% uptime. But I'm going to have to take advantage of that future opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and I think, with the limitations of geography, probably having something in the States here, obviously, I love these guys that are doing the tour right now. I mean, that's really serving the community well. That's pretty incredible to watch. Obviously, you've been kind of close to that as well. Any thoughts or promotion of that tour or encouragement to anybody around that?
Well, so yeah, the encouragement that I would give is if because Alan and Patrick, Abit Hex and Crypto Sparbu, Hex Lion, they've been traveling around a lot of the states, and not every single state they're going to be able to make. But I would just encourage people that, hey, if you haven't been to one of those workshops that they have, and if they're in your area, I mean, go give it a visit, because once again, the experiences online and watching the streams are just so much more different than meeting the people face to face. And it was really cool. Like I said, I live here in Bellevue, and then in Seattle is where the workshop was. It's like a 10-minute walk away from the girlfriend's place, which was really cool. But just the meeting the people. I'd also met a lot of new HEXICANs that I didn't know were in my area. And so that was cool, meeting people, growing relationships, and then just sharing something in common while spending good time with people that you care about. Because at the end of the day, I'd never really had a community growing up.
Yeah.
And even I played football with my brothers, and that was their community, but I just never really related. So the Hex itself and crypto itself was like, hey, this is like-minded people, freedom-minded and security-minded and stuff like this that I could really get behind.
Oh, that's awesome. That is great. Well, let's shift to PulseChain, and we'll kind of wrap it up with the PulseChain. This is obviously a new Ethereum fork with the system state coming over. There's some exciting things happening. We've got testnet up 395 nodes last time I checked, which is better than Ethereum had. $670 million sacrificed, which you could actually say is 14 billion potentially.
Yeah,
and just an amazing amount of excitement around the new blockchain. Tell me your thoughts on PulseChain and just give me your thoughts in general.
So I'm extremely excited. The one thing I do know is sometimes software can take a little bit longer than anticipated. A lot of us that were following Richard with the beginning days of Hex had realized that it was at least over 8 months delayed from when he had initially thought. But the point that I'm getting at, Richard's one of those people, as we talked about earlier, sometimes their style doesn't get across very well or received as it would, for a widespread audience. But when Richard kind of like sets his mind up to do something and says that he's going to do something, he does. And so I like that initially the HEXICANs were not really having too much of a problem with, hey, this is bearable, this is fine. And then it became to the point where it's like, okay, this is just ridiculous. It's cutting into a lot of people's profit. And now a lot of people have their stakes bleeding because they can't end their stake due to the fee. So long story short, Ethereum has been talking about Ethereum 2.0 since like 2017. And it's just something that hasn't happened yet. And when I heard Richard saying that he was going to fork Ethereum and do it better and do some of these other things, it was really exciting because I knew that, hey, this is like that next evolution. Because I followed Richard since he was a Bitcoin maximalist. And then he had said, oh, okay, this Ethereum thing that I'm not liking as much, it's actually got some things that Bitcoin doesn't and that Bitcoin won't have. And so he had kind of evolved. And then I saw him do Hex. And so it evolved again. And now with PulseChain, it really is kind of like a multi-chain universe that we're going in, where it's not just one crypto or one anything. It's like the network itself is going to be able to facilitate a lot more than just Hex. Like Hex will be one contract on there, but I'm excited for the whole ecosystem of people to see what Richard's capable of, what this community in general is capable of. This is probably going to be I've thought this is going to be the catalyst that the snowball rolling down the hill, or it's going to be the catalyst that really, makes the Sci-Vive, makes, Richard Hart, the community, Hex and Pulse just go viral in a way that we've always kind of thought it was going to happen, but hasn't happened yet due to the extensive gatekeeping that we've had.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The gas fees, the promise of Ethereum 2.0 is only driving the utility and value. I think of the cost savings alone of having a network that you could end stakes on is significant. And I'm excited as I can possibly be. And of course, a lot of that is probably how you felt at the beginning of Hex, right? You're like, hey, I got into this thing at the beginning. You're watching it. I think the long-term upside is huge. Now, I'm just always curious. I think this is a topic everybody likes to hear about. Give me your thoughts between eHex and then Hex on PulseChain. What are your thoughts as far as the future for both?
So I think it's almost going to be like a different class. Now, there's even a lot of HEXICANs that can afford the Ethereum gas fees, even though, you're not happy to pay them. But there's a significant divide of new HEXICANs that want to onboard that can't. They can't deal with the $150 or the $200 in between to onboard. So I think what we're going to see is eHex is going to be more purpose towards the longer stakes. And I don't see many short stakes being created on eHex per se. I see maybe some of that behavior switching over to Hex on PulseChain if there's going to be a behavior change. And that'll allow people to do some smaller stakes, maybe, I don't know, biannual versus an annual stake, that kind of thing. So I think both are still going to have value. I think the actual network themselves is just going to interact a little bit differently. Because once again, it's kind of like, I hate to say it this way, but it's kind of like the haves and have-nots, where like the people that have a lot of, gains from the Hex on Ethereum, they can afford the fees, but even still, they're kind of eating a lot of their profits and whatnot with those fees. So they might start shifting some of their behavior as well to the cheaper fee network. At the end of the day, it is all just the same smart contract.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just depends on also what Ethereum continues to do, because we've seen the actual gas fees go from, I remember they used to be a penny, like to start a stake, to end a stake, to transfer. And now it's like, sometimes like $100 just to do the transfer. Yeah. So I think the network themselves will kind of like an osmosis, like it'll go to where it's kind of treated best. And who knows, that might be the PulseChain network in the future.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So as far as PulseChain, I think one of the things that people keep asking me about and are interested in, and really the reason I started my very first video was I heard Richard at a meetup talk about the fact that liquidity was going to be provided by the sacrifice set. And, when I heard that, and I may have heard it wrong, and I'm actually looking for your insight onto this, I don't know a whole lot of people that got into the sacrifice set that are looking to sell and, to provide liquidity. And, you think about kind of this impermanent loss that could come with, why would I put this thing up that I got because I wanted it to go up? And what are your thoughts on that? And do I have it wrong? What are your thoughts as far as who's going to be providing and how liquidity is going to be provided?
Well, so that's the interesting part too, is there's just so much going on that as much as I would like to, consume everything and catch everything. Yeah. I never caught, I don't think that maybe that specific meetup or all of it. But what I can say is, if that ends up being the case, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people, like myself included. I've done very well with Hex and just other things that I don't ever need to sell Pulse. It's just going to stay there and accumulate. But that doesn't mean I'm going to, as you also say, like provide liquidity and let, that kind of be bought into or sold into, that type of thing. So I think what we have, at least with PulseChain and kind of just this network, is a lot of people that saw what Hex did, and that's with all the gatekeeping, and they see what PulseChain is doing, and it's just easier to understand. Yeah. But I think a lot of people are excited about this. Like, Hex was cool. It made crypto fun again, right? Where as we talk about like, oh, my brother's anniversary or my brother's birthday, things like that, where now you can look forward to the thing in the future. But with the PulseChain, it's just going to be so much bigger and better than Hex could ever do, right? Because it's a whole ecosystem and not just one subsection of that. So as far as the liquidity and all of that stuff goes, I'm not sure what all is going to happen, but what I can say is Pulse itself, I think, will do its 10,000x quicker than Hex. It's just got different gaming mechanics, and the fact that it's completely deflationary, the fact that it has a burn ratio, like the 25% into the transaction fees, things like this. And it's got that centralized economic ownership that, say, Hex does with its origin address that sacrificed. I think there's just so many things that have not only worked in the real world, but now worked in Hex and that are now being involved in Pulse. That's like, man, this is just a recipe once again for success, except Richard tweaked a few different things, like I mentioned, with the completely deflationary. And as you say as well, like, hey, if you're going to want Pulse, you're going to have to, if no one else is, if not the OA is supplying with someone else type of deal. And as we say, like, what are they going to sell it to you for the value? It's going to be more than what they sacrificed at, so it's interesting.
So, okay. So let's kind of wrap this up with this price prediction piece. This is what everybody wants to hear about. So I made a price prediction because I was listening to the streams with Richard, and, he talked about, he wasn't going to give any price predictions or anything, but he said, if you look at Ethereum, look what it did, and you look at Hex, he's like, I don't have any doubt that it can do something similar to Ethereum. That's a 14,000x. But I was kind of taking this 10,000x number, and I was basically saying the only 10,000x I can really see in 2 years is probably from sacrifice day one until essentially $1, right? That's a 10,000x. Sure. So you're thinking, well, Hex did it in under 2 years, and you think this will be faster. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah. So here's the reason why is because, as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, where like Hex just has had so much gatekeeping, and like the people that have stayed around have really like done their research and things like this. But with PulseChain, like even just as far as metrics go, when you think that, hey, Hex kind of grows through store of value and supply and demand, locking it up. Yep. But PulseChain is going to grow through like network adoption and how much is being utilized. Because we already see there's so many empty blockchains in crypto that just are kind of null, they're just sitting there doing nothing. And so the point is the other day on my stream, it was like over 50,000 members in the Pulse Telegram, almost 51. So it's probably 51 now. But then in Hex, we had, I think, like 36,000, something like that. And what I think is interesting is this is just the people that have heard about Pulse right now. Wait until the actual mainnet itself is launched and people realize like, oh, their NFTs, their ERC20 tokens, those are all copied over. That's going to immediately, even if they're going to just sell it immediately, that's going to allow them to hear about the new network that they maybe didn't before and allow them to do the interaction. And so what I try and tell some of the HEXICANs is that, it's easy to become, one track minded or focused on something that obviously made you successful. But even though people might not like every single project that goes on a PulseChain, we should still like encourage, right? Or at least not, down talk any of it, because that kind of behavior in those users coming on board are going to make your Pulse bag more valuable.
That's right.
And so it's been under 6 months and PulseChain has like 50,000 members is about how long the Telegram's been around. Hex has been around for the Telegram for about 3 years. Cause like I mentioned with the delay, the actual Telegram room was still out there. So I think that 10,000x, obviously, as you kind of mentioned from the beginning of the sacrifice phase, I think that's a much more realistic way to measure, where it's going in the future. But I see it happening more quickly than Hex did. I mean, just the lack of gatekeeping, people understand it more easily.
Yep.
And everyone knows that Ethereum has had just significant problems with its network, and they're all looking for something better, right? Whether it's Binance, Polkadot, Solana, they're all going to those other networks and taking from the Ethereum market share. And so I think things like Pulse since it's doing something that no one else has done with including the system state, I think that's going to really be the catalyst that just gives us so much more adoption and so much more growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, BallietBran making you happy with a 10,000x inside of 2 years. I'll tell you, you're making a lot of people happy with that. And one of them's me. It is so cool to meet you. I want to encourage you. I think it's awesome what you're doing. And I think, it's not always easy to be a voice in the wilderness, right? And here you are, probably the youngest guy out there and leading the way. And if you think about it, your future is extremely bright, especially as you get into the philosophical stuff with SciVive and other things, and wanting to help encourage people. I mean, I think you're going to have a lifetime of content to encourage people with, to help them understand what it's like to really live in a full way, if you will. So I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share a little bit more about kind of the background and personality. And I just want to give you an opportunity. So if there's anything that you want to share or anything on your heart that you'd like to share, I'd love to give you a minute here and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So just the last thing that I would say is, I'm just one person, you're just one person, but there's so many people in either community, right? Whether you're into SciVive, into Pulse, into Hex, there's so many people that do have amazing stories and that do have amazing things of value that they have that others maybe don't, or experiences, right? And just like when you had come on board, you didn't, I think you said like 34, 35 days ago, you never expected the kind of growth and adoption that you're seeing. You can see that the community itself is hungry for more. Yeah. And I would just encourage everyone that a lot of times we can be our worst enemies, the most self-critical and self-doubts, but there's a lot of people out there that I think that, similar to yourself and some of these other people, that can provide more value, or, maybe you see it in a perspective that others don't. And so I would just encourage people that, it's not like everyone has to start their own stream or things like this, right, but just the power of people kind of sharing their information. And the more that you have people with different opinions or different experiences, the less you have an echo chamber, and the more that we can all grow and succeed together. So I just, say thank you to people like yourself doing work, and to everyone else, keep it up. This community is very successful, and we're all going to, to the moon together.
That's right. That's right. BallietBran, thanks for your time, man. I really appreciate it.